specifically speaking, I think that, how do I want to put this? Maybe Olney is very much against the large companies coming in and pushing out the small businesses, and that makes sense. It makes perfect sense to me, but I think that there are a lot of markets that don't have any options for organic and natural foods, and in those markets, it's really good to see a Whole Foods come in, and I think Whole Foods Market brings a lot of better prices, and a lot more options and varieties than those smaller stores do. So. Once again, it's about balance.
And one more for Amy. What is the process for continual revision of core values and mission? Speaking of balance, how do you balance remaining open to this while maintaining operations and growing the bottom line? And this question asker speaks of the triple bottom line, which would be people, profits, and planet. So again, what is the process for continual revision of core values and mission? How do you remain open to this while attending to the bottom line?
Okay. The first 5 core values that I spoke of are the core values that were born with this company. And those, they really haven't been revised, so to speak. We've added 2 over time. So I think that we're pretty confident as a company that the core values as they are stated at this time are pretty solid, and I don't really see them changing. I do see potential for addition of more, and the local side could very well be something that's part of that. So we have summits and large gatherings every year where we bring the leaders of the company together into one room. Usually it's in Austin, and discuss the future and discuss our 10-year plan, our 20-year plan, our 30-year plan, and determine how those core values are fitting into the goals for the future. Is that answering that question?
Okay, Judy, you're up. Where can we learn about how you happen to go to the Amazon with $2,000 and start Kalari? Is it on the website, or do you want to tell us just a bit now?
I think I did an interview for grist.org. It may be on the internet still. Basically, I was interested in doing rainforest conservation, but I worked as a biologist within the United States, and I was pretty upset how, as a biologist, we were not encouraged to work with the local communities. So I did work with the Nature Conservancy, and this was over 15 years ago, but the viewpoint was we take very good data and we determine what lands to purchase that are the highest biodiversity. But they didn't want landowners to know, because then the prices would increase. So the focus was looking at the last great places in the world, how to buy, how to save it, and how to maintain it in these nature reserves, instead of really looking at the economic problems in the region and why people weren't living as sustainably as possible and maintaining their natural resources. So I was asked to volunteer with a small conservation organization that had a reserve that's only 20 square kilometers, right? So that's pretty small. It's probably the size of a nearby township, but that region had very high biodiversity, and they had indigenous villages that surrounded it. So I was asked to go and do environmental education in the indigenous villages that surrounded that area. I did not do Peace Corps because I didn't want to be an employee of the United States government, and I had friends that were connected to that conservation group. So I was given a house to live in, and basically I had a $2,000 budget for all of my food expenses, the project, my return flight, and trying to find my own visa. So for those 2 years. And I managed to make it through the year and a half. And at that point in time, the foundation was so impressed with the work that I was doing, they hired me to coordinate courses. And so then after that, I continued to work also as a volunteer for the indigenous communities and for this cooperative that we were forming, but I could work about 3 months of the year teaching ecology classes to private schools and universities from the United States and the United Kingdom that would come to Ecuador. So because I got a high enough income those 3 months of the year, then I could volunteer the other months. So I hope that's a good enough explanation. Yeah.
Thank you. Judy, what do you think Olney should do to integrate a higher bottom line with our established mission, culture, strengths, and resources?
Higher bottom line. I do think that Quaker culture is important. However, I think the most important thing you need to look is long-term or longevity. That maybe we need to find a way to take a little bit more so that we can continue to function in the future. And it doesn't mean that you have to charge more students or have more students here, but either try to find ways to source things for a lower price or work within the community that you can add some value and then charge for it. So that's one of the things, just like with the company Whole Foods, they're going to source things from farmers and they're going to sell them to people that want a high quality product. But they do pay those farmers a lot more for that high quality product. So it's something that I think of as growing a pie. So if you have a small pie and everybody takes a little piece of it, then we may be able to survive. It's not a big deal. But right now, what Olney is doing as an organization is possibly not sustainable to keep it open in the future. So you might have to grow that pie bigger, but even if you take your own little cut, it's going to be much more and it's going to maintain the organization. So it could be having more students, or it could be doing other types of educational programs within the community. I saw many of the students, people had suggested doing a 2-year sustainable agriculture degree. Or I'm not sure if you're familiar with WOOF, it's the Workers for the Organic Farms program, and I know hundreds of graduating seniors from universities that are willing to volunteer and do WOOF programs for a year, but you might be able to provide them with a very specific brief education before they go out to these WOOF programs. A lot of the students that I spoke with did not know anything about the agricultural cycle. They were completely unfamiliar with seed crops, when and where to plant them, whether, how potatoes are planted by a potato and not a seed. So there's a lot of things that maybe could serve as a basic introductory program for these WOOF students. And I do think that there is a niche, there's a market that you could provide that hasn't been filled yet. So whatever you decide to focus on, try and think of small ways to bring in an income, but at the same time, provide something for the people that are financing that or paying you for that education.
We have time for just a couple more questions. We got started a few minutes late today. The last question is for both Judy and Amy. Could you give your definition of a cooperative? In your definition, is being socially responsible or sustainable implied? And do you think this is true for larger cooperatives, such as Ocean Spray and Sunkist?
So there is a difficult aspect. Some of the large cooperatives, right, may only have 20 farmers that were the initial owners, and they're sourcing from other people, right? And those other people, their providers, don't have voting power. They don't have profit sharing. They're just getting a little bit better price than they might get from the market. That, to me, it may be a cooperative, but it's not an ethical cooperative because you have people that are making an income from other people that maybe have the same quality product, they just weren't there at the right place and time. So I feel personally that the most ethical source of type of cooperative is where it's more of a collective, that things are shared according to the person's participation. So say within our Amazon cooperative, people do a little bit better according to what their harvest was, right? Now, it does tend to, in some ways, jeopardize someone who had a very small harvest, but they also look into it if there were flooding or if there were other things involved that were outside of their abilities to change, then they'll take that into consideration. But they're also trying to word people that are working harder or maybe have more members of their family and they need a higher income. So, thanks.
Amy, do you want to take a crack at that?
I think that she's our expert.
Okay, great. And you've already addressed questions about scale and sustainability, which came up before. Let's take a moment before we break for chocolate and thank both of our presenters.